You are stupid. And no, I'm not saying that. It was a very strong belief of this man, the father of public relations, Edward Bernays, or as I call him, the father of the biggest psyop the world's ever seen. In order to understand public relations, you first need to know everything about the man who made it. Happy Monday and welcome back to AlpiTV. Born in 1891, Bernays started his journey by studying agriculture. Then he quickly realized that journalism was what truly interested him. Typical. I'll skip this part of his early career and jump straight to World War I. During World War I, Bernays was hired by the Committee of Public Information to employ his expertise and use propaganda for the benefit of the US and US allies. The psychological methods of propaganda were applied and desired reaction was evoked in people. After the war, Bernays thought if the principles of propaganda can be used in the war, it can also be applied to a man's everyday life.
When I came back to the United States, I decided that if you could use propaganda for war, you can certainly use it for peace.
In his book Propaganda, he wrote, "It is the purpose of this book to explain the structure of the mechanism which controls the public mind and to tell how it is manipulated by the special pleader who seeks to create public acceptance for a particular idea or commodity." In other words, Bernays wants to encourage a society where markets don't just sell products and services, they also control the very mind of their consumers. Now, I want you to understand the gravity of it. We used to live in a world where information was a means of understanding and, more importantly, education. However, if you learn the very psychology of how to control a human mind, you could just build the biggest psychological operation the world's ever seen. And that you control the narrative and decide how the society in America not only functions, but also live their lives, think their thoughts, and eat their breakfast, it could only mean one of two things. Either you are the smartest man alive, or you are the narcissist that considers everyone but yourself stupid. And I by no means am suggesting the latter. His daughter is. Take a listen.
It can be a little hard on the people around you, especially when you make other people feel stupid. People who worked for him were stupid, and children were stupid, and if people did things in a way that he wouldn't have done them, they were stupid. It was a word that he used over and over and over. Dope and stupid.
On the masses?
They were stupid.
You see, in his book Propaganda, he wanted to justify that propaganda isn't inherently bad. However, it has gained a negative connotation from the war. But those in power use this term to influence the people to participate in war and serve their selfish goals.
And propaganda got to be a bad word because of the Germans using it.
He wrote, "Let us make haste to put this fine old word back where it belongs and restore its dignified significance for the use of our children and our children's children." Meaning, he just wanted to use propaganda for his means and ideas and not face the backlash for using it. So he coined the name Council of Public Relations. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was the birth of what we now know and understand as public relations.
So what I did was to try to find some other words. So we found the word Council on Public Relations.
Or is it? Because to me, it's still propaganda wrapped up in a cute bow of sophistication. And that, in fact, is the biggest PR stunt in the history of public relations. The fact that you and I have accepted public relations as a mechanism borrowed from war and placed in the modern society, that should be a matter of concern to me. I don't know about you. Yet one of the many gifts of controlling the minds of people is that you can make them think and feel and associate any meaning to any word, even if it's as bad as propaganda. So what, LP? What's the point of any of this? So the man wrote a book about the word he had a problem with. What's wrong with that? It's not like he did anything bad. Yeah, you're right. He only really changed the whole of America into the largest capitalistic democracy with the largest number of consumers found on the map of the entire planet. He changed the way you think. Funnily enough, he also changed the way half of the world eat their breakfast and what they eat in their breakfast. He pushed women to smoke, overthrew an entire government to protect the sales of a fruit company. And you're right. It wasn't like he did anything bad, he just wrote a book. Look. Interestingly, Bernays thought that in order to deceive and control people's mind, we don't directly need to control people. You just need to control the minority groups who people depend on. For example, when it comes to health, a man falls short on his own wisdom and assumes that his physician knows better. So if you could influence the physician, you can influence the people following that physician. So would that mean that there's a possibility that even the profession like healthcare is highly corrupt? Interesting. One of Bernays' early campaigns is the reason why the standard American breakfast looks something like this. A plate full of eggs, bacon, and sausage. And why is that? Story time. You see, back in 1920s, an average American was eating light breakfast. Coffee, toast, cereal, leftovers, juice. Parallelly, a bacon company by the name of Beechnut Packing was incurring a lot of losses and wanted to sell more bacon. Naturally, the first point of contact was our very own father of public relations. Bernays had a medical doctor on his agency payroll, and so naturally Bernays asked him, "Do you think heavier breakfast is a good thing?" And he said yes. More energy during the day equals more fuel to do more work. He then asked his doctor to write to 5,000 doctors in the country, 4,500 of which wrote back agreeing with Bernays' agency doctor. The rest is history.
We carried out a letter to 5,000 physicians. We got about 4,500 answers. All of them concurred that a heavy breakfast was better for the health of the American people than a light breakfast. Newspapers throughout the country had headlines saying 4,500 physicians urge heavy breakfast. Many of them stated that bacon and eggs should be embodied with the breakfast, and as a result, the sale of bacon went up. And I still have a letter from Bartlett Kell, president of Beechnut Packing Company, telling me so.
And boy, oh boy, the bacon was sold. To actually think that something that people weren't consuming enough of became the first thing they consume every single day. Today, 70% of all bacon is eaten at breakfast. Moving on to one of his most scandalous campaigns, or should I say the most dramatic campaign, that openly defines Bernays as a puppet master. This is a campaign for a cigarette company, believe it or not. In the 1920s, when the feminism movement was at its peak, women were constantly fighting for voting rights among other equal rights in America. There was a company called Lucky Strikes, a cigarette company that hired Bernays to market his products. Their demands were to increase the sale of cigarettes. However, there was one teeny tiny problem. They only had men as their demographic. Women didn't smoke. But hang on. Only if Bernays could find a way for women to smoke. And he did. To understand this story, we need to understand what cigarettes represented to women. You see, cigarettes in 1900s was a symbol of a penis. I'm not joking. Women always desired it. However, the notion of a woman smoking was degrading. So Bernays called up a psychoanalyst in New York and asked, what does a cigarette represent to a woman? And he said, a penis. It was a symbol of male sexual power. Comes Easter parade that took place every year on the 5th Avenue in New York. Bernays hired some young debutantes to smoke at the parade. and called the cigarettes torches of freedom.
He knew this would be an outcry, and he knew that all of the photographers would be there to capture this moment. And so he was ready with a phrase, which was torches of freedom. That means anybody who believes in this kind of equality pretty much has to support them in the ensuing debate about this, because torches of freedom. I mean, what's on all American coins? It's liberty. She's holding up the torch.
Torches of freedom. The women smoked, the cigarettes were sold, and just like the Statue of Liberty, cigarettes became a symbol of freedom in the 19th century America. I wish that was the end of this horrendous campaign. Cigarette campaigns didn't just limit themselves to market cigarettes for women to smoke. They started claiming that women, get this, can lose weight if they have cigarettes. And not only that, the company also claimed that cigarettes killed sugar cravings. I don't know about you, but I've always wondered why an average American woman looks skinnier back in the day than an average American woman of today. And perhaps it wasn't all that great food they were eating. Clearly. Now this isn't the end of this story, unfortunately. The story goes wide and deep. That's what she said. But seriously, if you're interested, I will be making a separate video about the suffrage movement and the Torches of Freedom campaign. But for now, moving on to the next campaign. Now, to me, personally, this is one of the biggest public relations campaign that the 20th century ever witnessed, and was directed and executed by one and only Edward Bernays, following which public relations spread like religion in the whole world. You see, by the late 1940s, an American fruit company called the United Fruit Company dominated in the Guatemalan markets. Guatemala at the time was a dictatorship, and the dictators made sure that American interests came first in the country. The United Fruit Company controlled vast amounts of land. Not just that, the railways that moved exports and the ports that connected the country to the outside world. For the longest time, this arrangement was protected by the leaders of both countries. However, the working conditions for an average Guatemalan was brutal, and the resentment had been quietly accumulating. In 1944, a student protest broke out and spread into the nationwide strike. Within months, the Guatemalan president, who was the dictator friendly to US business, was forced to resign. For the first time in the modern history, Guatemala had a real chance to democracy. But this is not where the story ends. This is only where it begins. In 1945, the country elected a new president. This president believed in labor rights, education, and social reform. Most importantly, he truly believed that Guatemala should govern itself. However, for one particular party, this belief was extremely dangerous. The United Fruit Company, of course. The American corporations were no longer prioritized. The president of United Fruit did not like this very much, and the risk that came with it. Naturally, he went to one person in America who could help him, Edward Bernays. Between 1945 and 1951, the country went through a period of political unrest. Bernays used it to his advantage. The narratives were built and stories were crafted in the world media about how Guatemala is leaning towards communism. And in the Cold War America, that framing of communism really mattered. Think about the modern day America intervening in countries where it is not invited. Similarly, when the American media proved to the world that Guatemala's communism could deeply affect the citizens of Guatemala, we didn't have to justify the intervention to the world. It only needed to be executed.
Because things here never got returned to the peasants. This country is still a banana republic. The United States is still an empire. We just stopped using those terms.
The CIA removed Guatemala's president in 1954, and just like that, a man overthrew an entire government just to protect the United Fruit Company.
That night, Arbenz gives his final speech. In it, he condemns the United States for what it has done to his country. He insists that he isn't a communist, and that his only crime was trying to free Guatemala. By morning, he's gone, Seeking asylum in the Mexican embassy, he later flees the country. 10 days later, Armas is made dictator.
He is the reason why Guatemala doesn't have democracy. Can you think how insane that is? So no, he didn't just write a book. He wrote a part of history which you and I wouldn't understand. When I started studying public relations, it changed my perspective on everything. Why people fight, why countries go to war, why certain countries have democracy while others don't, why some countries are hyper-religious, yet people are known to commit the most heinous crimes known to mankind. Well, in the coming videos, you and I will go on a journey to defy gravity. In other words, we will together try and go against the flow and understand why things are the way they are. But always remember, a pen is mightier than a sword. Have a peaceful week.